Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and today I'm joined once again by Chaz. How you doing, Chaz?
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well. Excited to talk some more Kaladesh. And we are doing our Kaladesh set reviews. So today we have our top 5 blue cards for Kaladesh. And this has to be one of the most interesting colors on the list, I think. We have a lot of really weird and interesting cards coming out of blue in Kaladesh, highlighted by our first card, number 5 on our list. We have paradoxical outcome. So Chaz, what's your opinion on paradoxical outcome?
Yeah, so this made the list not because it's just your spoiler card, right?
Not
there's
just.
there's just a little bit bias there. Okay. So now that that's out of the way, this is a really like you highlighted before. There's some really interesting blue cards in this set. And I guess that's great because blue is sort of weird in this set. So it's like every card is so interesting. I think there's like a really great engine here. If there's a build around me card in Kaladesh, this is certainly one of them. I feel like it can be a really strong engine that can sort of be reused in some way. We're going to talk about another card here soon that can honestly just keep bringing this back to your hand, the Gear Hulk. And I think if you can find a way to exploit this, I think it could be potentially powerful.
Yeah, this card to me is extremely high risk and high reward. Not as far as gameplay, but as far as whether or not it works out. This is a card that has a really low floor, in my opinion, that it could very well just become a bulk rare and never really see play anywhere, or not see play for years, or it could be part of a really busted combo that can spike GPs and real tournaments. Like, it has that level of potential. We've seen fringe decks built around bouncing stuff back to your hand, like these Pure Steel Paladin Storm decks that use Hurkyl's Recall to cast a bunch of 0-mana artifacts, get them all back, cast them again. Paradoxical Outcome does the same thing, plus it gives you the added bonus of actually drawing a bunch of cards, which, if you're playing some weird stormy combo deck, is exactly what you want to be doing. So it, in some ways, doubles your storm count because you get to recast all the stuff you bounce, plus you get to cast a bunch of new stuff that you drew off Paradoxical Outcome. The downside is 4 mana is a lot more than 2 mana for like Hurkyl's Recall. So we'll see. I think that this card is really cool and fun. Whether or not it can actually make it on the tournament tables, we will see. All right, number 4 on our list, we have the spikiest of spike cards for Standard, the new Miscalculation in some sense, a 2-mana counter spell called Revolutionary Rebuff. And when we talked about our white cards, we talked a little bit about blue-white control, maybe being on the upswing in Kaladesh Standard. This is one of the cards that really makes me excited for that archetype making a comeback.
Yeah, absolutely. We've grown so accustomed to cancel that it's almost like unheard of that we even see this card. I think this is not only a great card for any control list, but all these tempo lists like spirits that are still around that can greatly benefit from this card.
Yeah, we don't get many good 2-mana counter spells. When we get 2-mana counter spells, they're usually very restricted, like Negate only hits non-creatures, or the reverse of that, like Remove Soul that only hits creatures. Not hitting artifacts is a small downside for this card compared to most of the 2-mana counters we can see. So I think this is about as close as Wizard is going to get in the modern sets to printing something like Mana Leak. It's obviously not as strong, but as far as 2-mana counters go, I think this is about the top of the line.
Yeah, absolutely. This is really going to insert itself at least into Standard as a great way for tempo lists to gain advantage, for control lists to stave off non-artifact creatures or spells in the hopes to stabilize before the game gets out of hand. I think this was a greatly needed tool.
There is a counter spell from this set that comes in at number 3 on our list. It's probably best in Modern, Legacy, Vintage, and that is Ceremonious Rejection. 1 mana, counter a colorless spell. Chaz, what's your analysis on Ceremonious Rejection?
I think it's very similar to what you just said. It might not see play in Standard as much as it is really a huge boon to other formats like Modern, Legacy, even Vintage at this point, where you can counter some insanely valuable artifacts that are played in those formats. Tapping 1 mana to counter Moxen or a Black Lotus or what have you, or anything else in Legacy or Vintage just sounds really great, and we don't see this too often. I don't know if it's going to be strictly better than Spell Pierce, just for main deck purposes, but this could play a niche role in sideboards for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you obviously don't play this in the main deck, I don't think, but I was watching the SCG tournament this weekend, and a lot of the best players there are saying Bant Eldrazi is probably the best deck in the format, and this is a really good, clean, cheap answer to Thought-Knot Seers and Reality Smashers. And then being colorless is a huge deal because it hits Ugin the Spirit Dragon. It hits Karn. So we've seen spells like this that only hit artifacts, and like Annul occasionally sees Vintage and Legacy play, and that's basically the same thing, but this hits so many more important cards. So I think if you were playing Annul, this just immediately takes that slot, and it's powerful enough that I think it's going to push more decks that weren't playing Annul to put this in their sideboard. I mean, 1 mana stop a Karn is amazingly powerful against Tron. Even stopping Reality Smashers, Drowner of Hope, so good, and I think it can show up in standard sideboards depending on the meta. We have powerful vehicles, we have powerful Eldrazi, Devoid cards like Kozilek's Return, so I think it could see some sideboard play in standard, but I'm really excited about it for Modern all the way back to Vintage. Moving on to number 2, we have another one of our crazy blue cards. This is my pick for one of the most underrated cards from the entire set of Kaladesh, and that is Metallurgic Summonings. This weird enchantment, storm piece. What do you think about this one, Chaz?
Yeah, you can certainly use this as a centerpiece for basically anything you want to be doing in a high-end mid-range list or even just a straight control list. It doesn't do anything that when the turn it comes into play that is kind of unfortunate, but as we go along throughout the game, this is going to be providing insane value each turn subsequently after that. And then just for kicks, you can bury it, you can exile it, and get all those cards back. So I think it's playing a really great dual threat as being a threat and a way to kind of bury your opponent in card advantage in multiple ways.
Yeah, there's just a lot going on with this card, and I could see this being a interesting card in a spell-heavy control deck where you just cast a 3 mana counterspell and get a 3/3 to come along with it. Like, even that seems pretty good in specific matchups. And I can also see it being a straight-up combo piece where you're trying to cast this, cast Gitaxian Probes, Thought Scours, things like that. You get a bunch of 1/1 artifacts, whatever. They're not that powerful, but if you can storm off... We see these decks in Modern that are playing Bedlam Reveler, Thing in the Ice, Pyromancer Ascension, that are kind of based on casting a bunch of Manamorphoses, maybe some rituals, other cheap spells, and this could be a great piece to that deck. And the last ability can kind of work as a replacement for something like Past in Flames. It allows you to just get everything back to your hand, which is essentially as good as casting all those cards from your graveyard. So I think that there's potential here. Whether or not it's better than other options, like Past in Flames, for example, being 5 mana makes it a little risky, and the like Thing in the Ice role, because that's 2 mana, Pyromancer Ascension, 2 mana. Whether or not you can use a 5 mana payoff card in older formats, I'm not 100% sure, but I think this card has a lot of potential and is super powerful, but it's another one of those cards like Paradoxical Outcome. The question is, does it find a home?
Yeah, I think you're good to have those concerns about the casting costs in other formats. I don't know if it's going to be a lot harder to invest in something like this when you have something like Past in Flames, like you said, as a payoff card. But in Standard, I think this is great. You basically don't have to play any threats because this is your threat at that point, and the added bonus of just cashing it in is just all upside.
All right, number 1 on our list, the best blue card in Kaladesh. Another member of the Gearhulk cycle, Torrential Gearhulk, Fatcaster Mage, as I like to call it.
that's I like that.
What do you think about this one, Chaz?
So this is my immediate thought on Torrential Gearhulk, and I know you're really excited about this because it's a blue card, right? So that's all about the blue cards. If you think back to Snapcaster Mage during Standard, and I know I'm not directly comparing this to Snapcaster Mage because there's really no comparison there, but on average, you probably are paying around 5 mana for the Snapcaster Mage, 4 or 5 mana. So at 1 extra mana in this day and age of Standard, I don't think that's a huge investment, 1 mana more to get a 5/6 out of the deal, and you don't really even have to pay for the instant. Now, I know you just get instants, but I think this is pretty close to where they want to be in terms of a Snapcaster-esque card.
Yeah, and yeah, if you're flashing back a cryptic command or a 3-mana counter spell in Standard, there's really not a whole lot of difference between this and Snapcaster, except you get a huge body as well. A 5/6 is magnitudes bigger than a 2/1, so that is the big upside there. Of course, it is more limited in that you can't cast sorceries, but I think this card has a place in Standard. I think it'll be very good in Standard, and I think it could even have a shot in Modern in specific control builds if you have something like Cryptic Command in your deck. I can see arguments for this being a one-of to reuse certain instants. So I'm super excited for this card.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's enough instance in Standard to warrant this playing Torrential Gearhulk. So I don't think there's going to be any short supply of good things to be doing with this particular Gearhulk, and I like it. I really like all the Gearhulks, but this one's really good.
Yeah, we talked about Gearhulk rankings on the podcast a little while ago, and this was my pick to be in the top 2. So I'm a big fan of Torrential Gearhulk.
Yep.
All right, so that has been our top 5 blue cards from Kaladesh. So let us know in the comments where you agree, where you disagree, and we'll be back tomorrow to break down another color. So Chaz, thanks again for joining me, and I will talk to you tomorrow.
Yeah, it's been awesome. See you all tomorrow.